Hi, this is Ivan, and welcome to the show. After much delay due to some crashing that I think I have fixed with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, we'll see, fingers crossed. I am finally able to do this review of the Moza AB9 force feedback base. I'm going to run through what I think about it. I've already done a video somewhere around here. I already done a video of the measurements and just kind of initial impression. But today, what I want to do is kind of use it, kind of go through a few things, and actually go through some of the software. If you just don't want to watch the whole video, I will just say I love it. It's a great piece of kit. In fact, it has inspired me. I sold my Alpha yoke. I sold my last non-force feedback yoke, and no regrets. I'm using this for everything, including helicopters, Cessnas, anything. I'm just flying it with a joystick right now instead of a traditional yoke. Up front, Moza did provide this base for me at their cost, but they don't get to see the video before I put this out. They have no control over the content of this video. But thanks, Moza, for sending that. I really appreciate it. So again, I love it. I have used Moza racing equipment in the past. I have a separate racing simulator rig that's pretty much entirely Moza, and I've really liked how they approach things. They're pretty high quality builds. I think they're reasonably priced. And I hope that what they've done in the racing world will extend into the flight sim world. Again, I'll go through all of this. I will say again, just from the beginning, in case you don't watch the whole video, the only thing I don't like about the force feedback yoke is it still doesn't quite get the trimming application right when you trim an airplane. I'll talk about that a little bit, but everything else, I kind of feel like it pretty much nails it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up, I'm already in Microsoft Flight Simulator, so I'll get that loaded up. And first I'll just kind of, here's the yoke. Here's how it's integrated into my setup. I'm using their clamp. It's sturdy. It's very sturdy, and I don't have any problem with it. It like my whole table will shake, and you can maybe see that, but it's not, there's no flex at the point where it's attached to the table. I think my future plans, maybe future plans are I eventually want to go to an aluminum extrusion rig like my racing rig is. But in the meantime, this is great. I love it. It's kind of wide. I go through all the dimensions in my other video, but it's a good spot. I've got good access to everything. It's got full range of motion. Let me move this up. It's got full range of motion here, and it's very easy to take in and out. So if you did have a more traditional yoke, then you could, unclamp. It's just the two screws here, and it's a 30-second to a minute operation, I think, to remove this, and vice versa for whatever you're putting in. What I like about this setup, I've got my throttle here, and over here it's harder to see, but I've got my wind wing, helicopter. I use this for the helicopter stuff. So the collective, and it is perfect. So I can fly like this for helicopters, and I can fly like this for everything else. The joystick I'm using is actually not the Moza. This is actually a Virpil. I wanted to see if it would work, and it does. It works fine. I haven't had any limitations from this because it was Virpil. It attached real easy. It's recognized. I do plan on getting one of the Moza joysticks because the only thing I don't like about this style stick is it is really meant for the right hand. And this is, in fact, the BBC Constellation Alpha for the right hand. And so there's a Moza that's still mostly right-handed, but it's not aggressive on the left side of the joystick, so it's easier, I think. It'll be easier to hold. I'm going to order one here pretty soon. So let's kind of go back. We'll go back to the sim. And so here we are. First thing I'm going to demonstrate is the helicopter. And here's where I really think this joystick base shines. So I have a WinWing Orion 2. I love it. It's in terms of non-force feedback, can't recommend it enough. But here's the problem with it. So you can take it apart. It has some things that you can take in and out that will change the tension of the joystick, how much its centering properties. You can also make it to where it doesn't center at all, which is how I currently have that joystick configured, meaning that when for example, let me come back over here. So right now this is configured for helicopter. I push it, it stays. Push it, it stays. Wherever you leave it, it stays. And that's great for flying helicopters, but not desirable for flying just about everything else. And so that Orion 2, again, it could be configured. I could put those things back in, make it more like a traditional joystick. And they also had, I believe, some attachments I could put it in to where it doesn't move at all. It just senses the amount of force that you're doing, and it turns that into control input. Well, what's great about this device here is that I can do all of that without taking the joystick apart, which is what you have to do with the WinWing joystick base. You have to remove it, turn it upside down, pull it out of its casing. There's different attachments that go inside. It's not necessarily that it's hard. It's a little cumbersome, and it's definitely time consuming. Whereas with this, I just load presets, and it's completely different. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some real brief flying. I'm going to fly in one of the helicopters and one of the Cessnas, and just to kind of fly around a little bit, take off land maybe, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about the software. So first, let's start with the helicopter, and I'm going to go ahead and go to free flight, and I've already got the Cabrigi 2, and I'm going to start out here in Alabama, and I'm going to start flight. I may mess with the weather a little bit. We'll kind of see. So right off the bat, it's already starting. I'm getting feedback from Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you have to run the Moza app, I believe, to get that to work. So now I'm going to hop in the helicopter, and I can feel the vibration. I'll do a real quick check. I'm getting movement. It's all dialed in. There's my pedals. Even further down, there's the collective. So we're good to go. And I'm going to change the weather up. And we'll do this. And clear skies, and that's fine. So we'll do that. So anyway, I'll go ahead and take off. And we'll just kind of do a little bit of flying, and I'll kind of tell you what I like. So right now, there's a vibration in the joystick. You can definitely feel it. If my hand's off, I don't know if you can see it, but it's vibrating. And so I'll go ahead and take off. And not too bad. And again, for the helicopters, you want the joystick to not fight you to go to the center. When you're using the cyclic, and I never know if it's cyclic or cyclic, sorry, but when you're using the cyclic, you don't want to fight it back to the middle. And I don't think the experience is good if you have to do that. I can feel some vibration, rotor vibration, and it feels nice. But the biggest takeaway, again, is that the self-center spring thing on this is basically set to 0. I'm looking at it right now. It's set to 0. And that makes this nice. So I could, and we will here in a second, jump into an airplane where I do want there to be some centering properties. And it doesn't necessarily have to be super aggressive, but you don't want it to just stay where it is. And I can just do that with basically changing presets, whereas before I would, have to remove the joystick, put the yoke back on, or if I was just using one single joystick, I would have to kind of change it around and again open it up. And this, I mean, if you think about it, the interaction with the yoke and the joystick, we spend a lot of time on the screens and, all the peripherals. But really, where the action happens for the most part, unless you're using like autopilot and things like that, is at the yoke and the joystick. And so having this force feedback and having the ability to change the properties, I mean the basic handling characteristics of the device super quickly is just amazing. And so again, this right here is worth the price of admission all by itself. I'll just kind of fly it around a little bit. I'm not the best helicopter pilot. Again, I'm sorry about the delay of getting this video out. I was having problems with Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. It was just constantly crashing. I put a video up asking you guys for help, and somebody responded. I've tried out their recommendation, and so far, so good. I haven't had any problems. So some other issues with the force feedback base is heat. You have to worry about heat. Now, that's going to depend on how strong you have your settings. It's also going to depend on how long you play. Heating has not been a problem for me, but I'm not flying aircraft with very aggressive joystick properties or handling properties and such that the motors really have to fight to work. And so I may just go ahead and try to land it at that helicopter pad without crashing. We'll see. But this is just nice. And again, I can let go, and the joystick is going to basically just stay where I left it. Whereas normal joysticks, I mean, you can take the springs out. There's things you can do, but you have to usually take something apart, dismount, remount, that kind of thing. And so man, do not let me fly a helicopter in real life. This is what I always do. I always get like right here to the end, and then I just like I'm all thumbs. All right, let's see if I can. Bam. Okay, so hopefully you saw what happened, but I'll go back to the joystick. So again, it's still vibrating. I'm still in the game. I can feel it vibrating. I don't know if you can even almost kind of see it, but again, wherever I leave it, that's where it goes. And that's great. It's not very hot. As a matter of fact, it's not hot at all. It's cold. It's very cold. It's only warm where I was holding it. So for helicopters, it's perfect. This is a great grip, by the way, for helicopters. But this is what I like about it. Now, what I'm going to do is real quick, we'll get a little more in depth into the software, but I'm going to take you to the actual software. And what I want to show you, bring your attention to, is you can see some of these settings here. And I don't know if you can see the cursor, but here's the spring and it's set to 0. I also want to also bring your attention to over here. The green dot is the positioning of your joystick. So I'm moving it around. Let's see if you can see this. I'm moving it around, and you can see that the green dot is going where I'm moving my joystick. The red dot that's bouncing in the middle, that is the force feedback pulling against you. But since I have the spring basically set to 0, it's not going to be very drastic because I'm asking it not to be. I mean, there's still force. It's not floppy. Like, I'm still having to overcome the force feedback. It's not a lot, but if I let go, there's minimal movement. I'm going to, like right there, I'm holding it, I'm going to let go, and it moves only the tiniest little bit. And so that's kind of what's going on with that. So now what I want to do is we'll switch over to to a Cessna. And here we are in a G1000 172, and I've got the joystick is still configured for the helicopter. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's go to here. I am going to switch here to the 172. And now this is cool. So what's happened is it's pulled itself forward. I can pull it back. You can see that red dot is going in the opposite direction. That's the force feedback that is fighting me. I pull back, and that red dot goes in the opposite direction. So that's the force feedback going in the opposite direction. But notice that right now, hands off, that the joystick acting as a yoke is fully forward. And let's go over why that is. And this is very, very cool. So I'm going to go back to here. Let's see. Okay. And let me just also really quickly come up here and change. Make sure that this is set up. Actually, I want that to stay the same. I want to come down to Bravo. I'm going to change this. That's already good. Now, for some reason, on your controller section, the Moza doesn't, there's no name here. So one of these is the base, and one of these is the grip. And it looks like it's all pretty much good to go. And we'll close out here. And let's just make sure everything is, so that's good, that's good. Pedals are good. Throttle mix is good. Everything's good. So here's what's cool. Right now, there's no airflow over the elevator. And so, over and under. So because there's just not enough, the yoke is forward. So see how the yoke is forward, or the joystick is forward. As we start rolling and there's more airflow over the elevator, this will normalize and come back. And that is extremely cool. Now, what it doesn't do is I can put on brakes, the parking brakes on, and I can throttle up. And in a real Cessna, the elevator, it would actually go up and you would see the yoke would come back. And the Moza, it doesn't do that. And that's a shame, but I mean, maybe that will be fixed in an update. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little quick flight, and we will go ahead and take off. So I'm going to turn the parking brake off and throttle up, and watch the throttle. I'm going to try not to hold it. See it come back? And that is very cool. So as the air is coming over and under the elevator and pushing it up, the throttle is coming back. And that's really cool. So we'll get it up to airspeed here and we'll go ahead and take off. And I'll just kind of fly around and then we'll exit out. So this feels completely different from the helicopter. Let me get a little altitude, and well, I'll show you some things that I can't do this low to the ground. But it just, again, it's not self-centering at this point. If I let go, it goes to a certain place. It goes to basically the middle, or wherever it thinks the middle is, given the airflow over the elevator and the airlines and etc. So I'll get a little altitude here. We're basically at sea level now, so we're already almost up 1,000. And this is on the Gulf Coast, Mobile Bay. Kind of head out to the bay. My old stomping grounds. I highly recommend a visit. Go see the USS Alabama battleship. It's awesome. And so here we go. So here we are up here. And what I want to do is I'm going to bring back this bottom left, this bottom screen. And you can see I'm letting go. And right now the joystick is self-centering. I'll bring it back. And you can see that red dot I'm pulling, as the green dot rather, and as I'm pulling back, the red dot goes in the opposite direction. But if I go like this, I'm banking right now. If I let go, it goes back to the middle. So there's that, and we'll kind of show you. Again, pull back. I'll lose control of the airplane here. Pulling back, I let go, it goes forward. So that's pretty cool. And if I wanted to, on the fly, again, you have to have the Moza software running to do this, but on the fly, I could increase that self-centering and make it harder and you know, or easier, however I wanted to do it. I could make it do that pretty much on the fly. And that is what is great about this joystick base and what I really, really love about it. Especially given that I do spend probably a third of my time in helicopters, and this makes it so much easier to go back and forth. And so I think this is pretty cool. What I want to show you now, so here is, I mentioned to me, the biggest area not addressed with this, and it's a software issue, and I believe that Moza could address this. I'm not in contact with them. I don't know what their plans are, but I can say that on the racing side, they do seem to listen. They do frequent updates, and I've already had a couple on this. We'll see how it goes. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't trim the way it would if I was actually flying in a Cessna. And here's what I mean by that, in case you don't know. And so normally, you can see I'm pulling back on the joystick. I would, let's say I wanted to do, VY, which is usually about 72. And you can kind of see on the G1000 screen, that's about what we're doing. Well, if I'm climbing to a certain altitude, I certainly don't want to sit here and hold the yoke like that the whole time. I want to let go. Well, if I do that, it would immediately nose down. Well, in a situation like this, you would use trim. And what you would do is you would bring the yoke to where you want it, and then using either the wheel in the airplane or a switch on the yoke, you would nose up until you would feel with your hands and your arm, you would feel how much force you're applying to keep that yoke or joystick in the same position while you're getting it dialed in. And as you get it trimmed, you have to apply less and less pressure until you get to a point where you could let go and the yoke or the joystick would not move from where it is, and you would maintain that nose up, nose down, level flight, whatever it is you're doing. When you're flying in real life, in a Cessna, you are constantly adjusting the trim. During takeoff, during landing, you're constantly adjusting, especially during the approach and the departure. You're constantly doing adjusting the trim. And the idea is that the yoke would stay in the same place. This does not do that. And that is, I hope that gets addressed. I really believe that that could be addressed with software. In the Moza program, there's under basic settings, there's where the telemetry comes from. And there's telemetry just directly from the flight sim. And then there is Moza telemetry, where basically it's receiving the input from the flight simulator, but it kind of retranslates that into other things. And then there's where you can kind of mix that, and you have control over that. But it's as of right now, and today is the 23rd of December, you can't make it to where it'll hold the joystick or yoke in place. You can still trim it out, but what happens is you're just basically trying to get the middle position of the yoke to work, and that's not how it is in an actual flight. But other than that, it's pretty decent, and we'll see. Let's see, we can maybe find an airport and land. Nearest, and here, and landing is, it feels pretty good. You can feel the bumps of the plane. Let me get this teed up for landing, and then we'll kind of do a landing, and you'll kind of see what's going on. So I'm just about to land, and I thought what I would do before I land, one more thing that's kind of neat. I'm gonna stall the airplane. Hopefully it doesn't make me crash. I'm not that high up in the ground. Kind of use my pedals, keep my horizon. And you can feel that in the joystick. You can feel the buffeting. And that's really cool. So we'll continue on to set up our approach for landing. Okay, I'm coming up. I'm about to make a right-hand turn here and line myself up. I'm cutting this kind of close. As I'm adding flaps, I'll go ahead and add flaps. And when I did, you could feel in the joystick the rumble increased as the flaps are extended and there's more resistance. You can feel that in the grip. So that's nice. Like I said, I'm cutting this kind of close, trying to keep it decent here. I'm going to go kind of slow approach. Full flaps right now. I love, I got the vibration. I can, as the motor's slowing down, there's more of this coarse vibration, and you can feel that. And that is really cool. And so I'll go ahead and line up here, trying to hold at 65. And I got pretty good line up here. A little bit of turbulence, and you can feel that. And just as an aside, I do feel that the physics are a little bit different. I've noticed that my landings are a little bit bouncy. especially my crosswind landings compared to 2020. I'm not sure if that's just me. It's probably just me. All right, I've made the runway. I'm going to pull power. I've got the runway expansion, and my yoke is just much more vibrating. And okay. And it's vibrating even more. And you could feel that when you landed. It wasn't super aggressive, but you could definitely feel it. And I'll go ahead and come to a stop and apply my brakes and power. And as I pull back on the mixture, it got the vibrations increased, and then it stopped. I'll turn that alarm off. And now what I want to do is go into the software and talk about the software a little bit more. So here we are in the software, and you can see the different parameters. I'm not going to go through all of these because Moza does a very good job of, you can hover over it and you can kind of see. But the ones I want to point out the most are over here. You've got, so under basic, you've got presets. It's got a handful of simulators, including 2024, and this does work under 2024. And right now I've got it set for Cessna 172, which seems to cover a lot of the general aircraft. I haven't worked so much into making new presets, but there's a button over here that says new preset. I haven't been through all that yet. But I could go through here, like I've got my centering. Let me, so I can pull this back and you can see that, well, if I bring the spring up, it's much faster and harder to pull back. You can see, again, you can see that red dot as it's pulling against. That's the counter force. That's the force feedback counter force. So I could bring this down and put this force feedback intensity, and you can see how that red dot's not even really moving. This is the green dot's going everywhere. That's where the yoke is, joystick, but not a lot of force against it. I can bring that up. I pretty much leave this at 100 on the Cessna, and you can see that it's pulling back. My understanding is that on the Moza website that this has 12 Newton meters of peak force, and that feels about right. And again, there's a lot of ground that can be covered from here where I've got a good amount of fight. I say fight, opposite force. And it comes, right now it's not coming back to the middle because I'm in the Cessna and I'm on the ground. Let me exit out of that into the main menu. So now I'm not in any given airplane, and you can see there's further settings where you can make dead zones. It goes through the different effects, so you can, how pronounced you might want the engine rumble, and just kind of go through. So you may want to go through the engine rumble, and it changes depending on, so here's propeller. If we were in a jet, then these would be available. You can turn stuff off and on, and, and then it's got the helicopter effects. Here's something that I really like. It's got axis travel and axis force. So you can make how much the force is. You can change the curves of the force on the X and Y axis. And that's really cool. But I love this axis travel. And I'll show you a preset where that's really comes into play. But you can see as I'm going forward and back and left and right, you can kind of see, well, I have full range of motion. And you can see these numbers here indicate axis positive travel, axis negative travel limit. You can set that to numbers. So you can totally dial this in. If I come back over here to basic settings, I can, if I look at DCS World, which I don't use, but you can still open up the presets. Now, this is really cool. Just by having a preset that was different, now I've got it to where this doesn't want to move. This doesn't want to move at all. And this is for those airplanes where the joystick just senses the force and translates that into the control surface input. So it just knows that you're applying a certain amount of force and it's going to generate that electronic signal. And if you look on where the green and the red are, I'm barely moving it, but I'm getting full range of travel. And where that comes into play is axis travel. You can look here and see that the setting has been turned down to 15%, which means with 15% of travel, I get 100% of output. And that's what that means. So I can make it to where with minimal movement, I'm getting larger outputs. And so there's a fighter jet where you're pushing against it, but the joystick doesn't move significantly. I don't know a whole lot about those, but that is what that's for. And then again, the linear aspect, or you could do a curve. So here under special, there's a section that says hardware trim mode, and I've played with this and I'm not entirely sure what it's for. Apparently if your flight sim doesn't have force feedback telemetry, you can kind of mess around with this. I tried a few things. I couldn't get it to be responsive or do anything. I was kind of hoping that it would replicate the trim function when you would fly, like we discussed earlier, but it doesn't seem to do that. So again, I'm not sure what that's for. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that if you're thinking about getting into the force feedback world, that you take a look at this device. I think it's a good first step. Again, only a couple of things that I don't care for. One, the big one is the lack of how it should respond to trim. Now, this is for Microsoft Flight Simulator. DCS, it may work perfectly in terms of how things trim. I'm just speaking for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I also wish it would replicate if you're in the Cessna and you've got the brakes on and you bring up the throttle, that prop airflow would push the elevator up and make the yoke come back like in real life. Doesn't do that, but it does respond to the airflow created by the aircraft moving through the air. So that's great. It is, this is more expensive than a normal non-force feedback yoke. I get it that money is always an object, but I will say this, that my theory is on force feedback is that it's where you really and truly interact with the simulator. And so I think this is a good step in the right direction. Moza is not the first company to bring force feedback to the table, but I think they have shown up strong with a good option to pick up, I think at a relatively reasonable price. And for some of you out there that have some Virpil joystick grips, you may already have something that works with the Moza base, so it might be a pretty good move for you to consider. In any case, if you have questions, please put them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer. And as I get more and more comfortable with it, I may do an update video just to go over some of the more nuances of the program settings. But again, check it out if you can. If I know Micro Center carries them. I'm not sure who else carries them other than ordering them online. But hopefully you guys have access to it in some way or other. Hope you have a good holiday, and I will see you guys later.